They called me a beggar as they drank the champagne I paid for. They just never thought the beggar owned the bank. Hit that subscribe button for Revenge with Roxy. And let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from as you join me on this ride. The air in the Grand Hotel lobby was thick with the scent of lily and quiet money, a symphony of polite laughter and the clinking of crystal. I had arrived early for my parents' family celebration, dressed in a silk gown the color of a midnight sky, my smile a carefully constructed mask. For years I had played this part, the dutiful daughter, the quiet contributor, the one who smoothed over financial rough patches without ever asking for a thank you. I carried a sliver of foolish hope that tonight, celebrating their anniversary and my sister's engagement, might be different. That tonight, they might finally see me. But as my hand, trembling ever so slightly, reached for the ornate brass handle of the ballroom door, a voice, sharp and cold, cut through the ambient warmth. "Sorry, you're not invited. Leave." The words came from my mother. I blinked, a genuine unscripted laugh escaping my lips. It had to be a joke, a cruel, tasteless, but ultimately harmless prank. It wasn't. Two broad-shouldered security guards, previously invisible against the mahogany walls, stepped forward, their expressions impassive. And then my father, the patriarch, delivered the killing blow. His voice, a familiar baritone that once read me bedtime stories, boomed across the marble expanse, loud enough for every guest in the lobby to turn and stare. "Get this beggar out. My name is Lana Hartley. I'm 35 years old." And in that moment, as dozens of eyes burned into my back, I did not cause the scene they so clearly craved. There was no screaming, no pleading, no satisfying explosion of drama for them to gossip about later. I simply straightened my spine until it felt like a rod of steel, my gaze flicking from my mother, who was now intensely studying her diamond rings, to my sister, whose lips were twisted into a triumphant, venomous smirk. Then I turned and walked away. The only sound was the steady, defiant click of my heels on the floor, a metronome marking the end of an era. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly comprehend as they toasted their good fortune, was that I was the ghost in their magnificent machine. The very foundation of their celebration was a monument to my invisible labor. The opulent venue, the gourmet catering with its miniature truffle tarts, the ridiculously ornate, gold-plated invitations, the fleet of Airbnb rentals for out-of-town relatives, even the towering champagne fountain my mother had deemed essential for the aesthetic, it was all funded by me. They told everyone it was a spectacular bonus from Dad's retirement. A lie. The truth was a quiet, steady hemorrhage from my business account, funds given willingly, repeatedly, out of a desperate sense of familial duty. Until now, in the cold, leather-scented sanctuary of my car, I allowed myself one single shuddering breath. The mask crumbled. But tears wouldn't fix this. I pulled out my phone, the screen a stark white light in the dim parking garage. I opened my banking app, my fingers moving with a cold, surgical precision. The demolition had begun. $7,200 for banquet catering. With each digit I typed, I remembered every holiday dinner where my own cooking was subtly criticized, reversed. $12,000 for my sister's first-class honeymoon flights. I pictured her laughing with her friends about my perpetually single status. Revoked. $4,800 for a spa weekend for my mother and her book club. Desperately needed escape from the stress of planning the party. Gone. And the big one. The $52,000 in ongoing payments for the beach condo they proudly called Dad's legacy. The one they used for family gatherings I was only invited to as an afterthought. All of it channeled discreetly through my LLC, frozen, effective immediately. The total damage inflicted in the time it took to boil a kettle, $76,000. By the time I pulled into my own driveway, my phone was a pulsing, frantic beacon of 56 missed calls. Then came the knock on my door. Not a polite rap, but a hard, angry fist hammering against the wood. I peered through the peephole. My breath caught. I slowly, silently, engaged the deadbolt and the chain lock. I turned and walked to my home office, retrieving the thick, meticulously organized binder I had been preparing for 3 long years. Just in case. My sister's brand new husband stood on my porch, his face a blotchy, furious red, his tie askew. He was clutching his phone like it was a live grenade. "You need to fix this," he barked, his voice raw with panic. "They just canceled the entire banquet spread. The hotel won't release the block of rooms for the family, and my honeymoon tickets, our tickets were just voided mid-check-in." I leaned against the doorframe, a picture of detached curiosity. "How strange," I mused. "It almost sounds like someone didn't bother to double-check who actually owned the accounts that were funding their fantasy lifestyle." His eyes widened, the cogs turning. "You did this! You did this because they kicked you out." "No," I corrected him, my voice dangerously soft. All the emotion bled out of it. "I did this because they forgot the one single cardinal rule of biting the hand that feeds you. You must always make sure that hand isn't holding the ledger." He tried to crane his neck, to see past me into the house, perhaps searching for our parents, perhaps looking for a flicker of regret he could exploit. But regret was a tenant I had just evicted. I held up the binder, its weight feeling solid and real in my hands. "Inside this folder," I explained, letting him see the color-coded tabs, "are the signed contracts listing my LLC as the sole financial sponsor for tonight's events. The cancellation clauses clearly stating my name as the only authority who can terminate the agreements. The digital receipts and payment reversals, all time-stamped to within the hour of their little performance in the lobby." I let the weight of it settle in the humid night air between us. "I warned them 3 years ago, the last time they pulled a stunt like this. I told them if they insisted on treating me like a bank, I would eventually have to start acting like a banker. Today, they defaulted on their loan of my goodwill. You're punishing the whole family for what 3 people did," he accused, his voice rising. A thin, cold smile touched my lips. "I'm not punishing anyone. I am protecting my assets and decisively cutting my losses. It's just business. They're your parents," he roared, playing his last desperate card. "They called me a beggar," I replied, the words flat and final. He had no answer for that. He just stared, deflated, before turning and stomping away, muttering about lawyers and taking this higher. A hollow threat. You can't climb higher than the person who owns the mountain, the contracts, and the encrypted, off-site backup drive. I closed the door, walked to my desk, placed the binder down, and opened a new file on my computer. I labeled it Inheritance Audit. Phase 2. By morning, my inbox was a war zone. 32 emails, a chaotic mix of pleading, threats, and sheer, unadulterated panic. My mother's was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. "We didn't mean what we said, Lena. Emotions were just so high. Can we please talk?" My father, true to form, said nothing. He simply forwarded the venue's invoice, now screamingly unpaid and threatening legal action, as if I were somehow responsible for settling it. But my favorite artifact of the morning came from a cousin I barely spoke to. It was a screenshot from a family group chat I'd been kicked out of years ago. The sender was my sister. Her words typed out for all their relatives to see. "Lana's always been so sensitive. She get over it and come crawling back. She always does." I laughed out loud. It was a raw, cathartic sound in the quiet of my house. Then I forwarded the screenshot to the entire group, including the extended family members they thought were on their side. My reply was simple. Just a friendly reminder. I own the crawl space, and the locks had been changed. The digital silence that followed was deafening. But later that afternoon, an email I had not anticipated arrived. It was from my parents' longtime accountant, a gentleman named Arthur. He wanted to schedule an urgent call to discuss some irregularities he'd noticed in their filings. He'd observed that the substantial payments for their beach condo hadn't been coming from their trust, as they'd claimed, but from an LLC he'd never seen before. Mine. On the phone call, after confirming that my company was indeed the source of the funds, I took a breath and asked the question that had been nesting in the back of my mind for 3 years. "Arthur," I said, my voice calm, "have my parents ever declared that condo as their own asset in their annual tax filings?" A long, crackling silence stretched over the line. "Well," he finally said, his voice hesitant. "They claimed it was an inheritance gift from a private, anonymous family investor. There's no documentation. The floor didn't drop out from under me. It solidified into bedrock. They hadn't just been ungrateful users. They had committed felony tax fraud, using my quiet generosity to build equity in a property I still legally owned, all while dodging the taxes on it. They weren't just morally bankrupt. They were criminally exposed. Would you be willing to sign a formal declaration to that effect from my records?" Arthur asked tentatively. "Yes," I said, the word tasting like victory. "I will. Right after I call my lawyer and ask him how quickly we can serve them papers that will make that condo, and every unpaid cent of tax associated with it, legally and irrevocably untouchable by them. That would be a significant legal move, Lana." "They called me a beggar, Arthur," I replied. "This is no longer a family squabble. This is a federal matter." Within 48 hours, the legal machine was in motion. The papers drafted by my lawyer, Reed, were a work of art, a cease and desist for slander, misrepresentation, and unauthorized use of funds, and a property reassignment filing that vaporized any verbal claim my parents had over the beach house. Reed, a man with a mind like a steel trap and zero patience for nonsense, slid the documents across his polished mahogany desk. "They'll try to call your bluff," he warned, his eyes sharp. I smiled, a genuine, humorless smile. "They already did, Reed. That banquet was the bluff. They just didn't realize I was holding all the cards." An hour after the process server confirmed delivery, the family celebration officially devolved into a full-blown financial reckoning. That night, a voicemail from my mother landed in my inbox. It was a long, tearful, rambling tirade. "You're destroying this family over a simple misunderstanding. You always have to be so dramatic, Lana, making everything about you." Ah, yes. Dramatic. The word men like my father and women like my mother used to silence daughters, while they happily foot the bill for their lives. "If you follow through with this," she threatened, her voice turning to steel, "people will talk. The church, the neighborhood. Think of your father's reputation." It was never about love or family or me. It was about the performance. The illusion of a perfect, prosperous family. The brand of love, not the reality of it. I let the voicemail rot, unanswered. Something far more important had arrived in my inbox. An email from my accountant. Subject: account transfer confirmed. The beach condo title was finalized in the state registry. It was legally, irrevocably, indisputably mine. The taxes they had dodged for years were now their problem, filed with interest and penalties. Reed emailed shortly after. "You've closed every door and locked every window. Want to take it one step further and check the foundation?" I typed back instantly. "Yes, I want a full forensic audit of the family trust. Going back to the day I incorporated my business in 2017, they didn't just call me a beggar. They built their entire gilded kingdom on my back. It was time to build them for the throne they never let me sit in." The audit was a deep, painful dive into a septic tank of casual betrayal. Reed's forensic accountant uncovered a decade of financial bloodletting. $18,000 withdrawn for emergency roof repairs. The week one graduated from college turned out to be a custom-designed kitchen for my sister's first apartment. $9,000 labeled as education expenses had actually paid for front row, concert tickets, and a spa weekend for my mother. $34,000 had been quietly siphoned off to fund my father's antique car restoration. Vehicle he once proudly told his friends was a reward for raising such responsible, successful children. They had bled that trust account dry, treating it like their personal slush fund, and then had the gall to stand in a public lobby and call me the beggar. Is this criminal? I asked Reed, looking at the spreadsheet of damning evidence. He nodded slowly. Potentially. Misappropriation of trust funds is a serious offense, but I didn't want to see them in jail. I wanted something more profound. I wanted accountability. We filed a civil motion, a request for full financial recompense for every misused dollar, complete with the auditor's documentation. They had 30 days to respond or settle privately before it became public record. And that's when the mask didn't just crack. It disintegrated. An unexpected text came through from my mother. "I'm scared, Lana. Please don't ruin the family over money. We'll make it right, I promise." No apology. No admission of guilt. Just raw, undisguised fear, the only language they ever truly spoke. I stared at the message for a full 5 minutes before replying with a single line. "You're confusing ruin with revelation." The next day, my sister posted a heavily filtered photo of a sunset to her social media. The caption was a masterwork of passive aggression. "At the end of the day, it's so important to know who your real family is. So sad when some people only show up when there's money involved." I didn't comment. I didn't need to. Because online, they could spin whatever narrative they wanted. But in a court of law, every word had to be proven, every signature traced, every dollar accounted for. And suddenly, the girl they had always dismissed as overly dramatic had become the one person they would have to answer to. On day 22, their lawyer reached out. His tone was clipped, his language a desperate scramble wrapped in legalese. He offered a private settlement, $50,000 in restitution, no admission of wrongdoing, and a mutually binding non-disclosure agreement. Reed chuckled when he read the email. "They're trying to buy your silence. Seal the cracks before the neighbors can peek in." But I didn't want money. Not really. I wanted a record. I wanted undeniable proof that I wasn't the black sheep. I was the scapegoat, the silent benefactor, the unpaid, unappreciated lifeline they had finally severed. We declined. On day 25, my father broke his silence. He showed up, unannounced, at my office, the thriving business they once condescendingly called my little side gig. He didn't come in. He just stood in the doorway, holding his hat in his hands, his legendary pride barely clinging to his slumped shoulders. "You've made your point, Lana," he said, his voice raspy. "But you're about to ruin us. Are you proud of that?" I looked at him, at the man who once toasted my sister at a family dinner as the real success story, while I was quietly paying off his credit card debt. I didn't stand up. "No," I said, my voice calm and even. "I'm not proud. I'm tired. I am tired of funding your life while being systematically written out of your legacy." He opened his mouth to argue, but I raised a single hand, stopping him. "You stood in a room full of your peers and you called me a beggar." So I stopped giving. And suddenly, as if by magic, everyone remembered what I was worth. He didn't apologize. He didn't cry. He simply reached into his jacket, pulled out his checkbook, and left a folded check on the edge of my desk. It was blank, signed, an offer to buy his way out. I slid it back across the polished wood towards him. "This was never about your money," I said. "It was about mine." When he left, I opened my inbox. A new message had arrived from the county court system. A preliminary hearing for the trust disbursement fraud case had been scheduled. The date was set. And this time, they would all have to show up not to celebrate, but to answer. The hearing date spread through the family like a cracked pipe, a slow leak at first, then a flood that filled every group chat I was no longer a part of. They never believe you'll really go through with it. They expect silence. They expect shame. They expect the one they push to the margins to quietly return and keep the peace while they continue to feast. But this time, I wasn't setting the table. I was the star witness for the prosecution. Reed and I prepped everything. A minute-by-minute timeline of the banquet, every bank statement, every email, every screenshot of a text message where my mother asked me to just spot them a little this month. All the invisible IOUs, now made painfully visible. The night before the hearing, my sister messaged me for the first time since she smirked at me in the lobby. "If you go through with this tomorrow, I swear to God, Lana, I will never forgive you." No apology. No denial. Just a threat. As if my peace of mind was something that required her permission to exist. I didn't reply. Some people don't want reconciliation. They want a reinstatement of the version of you that was convenient for them. The version that stayed quiet. The courtroom was cold and impersonal. My parents sat across the aisle with their expensive lawyer, their backs ramrod straight, faces like stone. The judge, a woman with intelligent, weary eyes, asked simple questions. Reed answered them not with rhetoric, but with math. He projected charts and spreadsheets onto a large screen for the entire room to see, demonstrating with cold, hard data how the condo payments originated from my LLC, how the trust was systematically siphoned for personal gain vacations, spa days, cars, all under the guise of family needs. My parents' attorney objected repeatedly, claiming informal family arrangements and that this was all a simple misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But the judge wasn't moved by his theatrics. She turned her gaze from the screen to me. "What outcome, precisely, are you seeking here today, Miss Hartley?" I stood up, my voice clear and steady, echoing slightly in the quiet room. "The truth, Your Honor. On paper. That is all. I want the official record to finally match reality." She nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. Gavel. And with that single sound, my name was no longer just a footnote in their tangled finances. It was the headline. And for the first time in my entire life, the room went quiet on my terms, without anyone needing to escort me out. They didn't speak to me after the hearing. No calls, no letters, no half-hearted attempts at "we didn't mean it," just silence. The profound, deafening silence that comes when a long, exhausting performance